All right. Welcome to the MatchNet podcast. This myself here, Yana Johnson. We've got Benjy and we've got Tomomi Fukuda here. And yeah, we're excited to talk about this topic, or it's really me that initiated this topic. I've got kind of a cheerful tone, but it's more about
what are we talking about?
Approaching uncomfortable topics or discussions, especially when you're in a matching conversation. I mean, in general, this is a good topic.
I already feel uncomfortable, Yana.
Yeah. So that's why we want to go into this. Like, I think for Benjy and I, this is a big part of our work in BFM, and Tomomi, and you've started where we have a lot of not easy conversations about a variety of things. But when it comes to the matching process, and when you're talking with someone and considering your future together, I mean, there's a lot of things that come up, right? That are, in some ways it's even more like a intense situation because you've got to decide on these long-term decisions, and it'd be easier if you could kind of avoid it. We do that maybe with other areas of your life, but you don't want to do that in the matching process. So we want to kind of talk about what's a good way to approach uncomfortable conversations. Was thinking a lot, especially about lifestyle, about how you see life of faith, spirituality, future, how you want to raise your kids, So we've got we've got us here kind of just sharing our input, and when is a good time to approach this, how to approach this. Any other thoughts you think would be valuable for those who are in conversations right now?
What are some parameters of what difficult conversations might be? Because you mentioned a few. What else is there? I don't know. I've never been in difficult conversations before. So
yeah. Just kidding. I mean, I think, what's interesting is I feel like, I guess this is my going already into approaching this, but like people define this a bit differently. Like for me, talking about, for a long time, talking about my family or my parents' situation or how I felt about it was really hard because I was still working through a lot of it. So I feel like it's very much what's on you, what you feel kind of personally. I think areas of your life where you're a bit embarrassed or even heavier shame or guilt feelings, like even if other people may not see it that way, like you feel that way. And so a lot of my heart for why I want to talk about this topic is I think that sometimes we build it up so much in our head instead of just approaching it and talking about it. And you might be surprised how someone else would respond to you, or past habits that you've had in your life or past things you regret. But if something's weighing on your conscience, I think we isolate ourselves, unfortunately, and like get in our head instead of talking about it and really even feeling loved by like, wow, they don't see me as this weird person or, see me differently. And I feel I do that a lot in my role, just listening to people and like validating. But I think in a matching conversation, there's an added layer of expectations about future, and it's just, a bit more pressure. So but I think ultimately it's the person themselves, right? Like if there's something weighing on you or you don't know, or the question you really want to ask that person because maybe they hinted that they're not sure about kids or something like that. Like how do you, when do you address that? How do you approach that? And I feel everybody's a little different too, of course, but that's why having us share a bit tips, experiences is good. Kind of wanted to, I brought Tomomi especially. I was thinking if there's some, being someone who went more recently through a lot matching conversations towards now being blessed. What comes to your mind when you think about this?
First of all, thank you, Yana, to have this podcast. And it's nice to see. It's nice to join this podcast. Yeah, I'm right now 31 years old. I breast last April. So yeah, my guessing my age is yeah, turn 31 at the time. So I had a time to wait long time to yeah, to receive blessing. And then yeah, you mentioned a couple of question you brought yeah, during my matching process, or even like my preparation for blessing too. Yeah, couple of like sensitive question. And when I like to start family, and also what is my future plan? Yeah, including like starting family, also what is my belief, understand how much I deep understand true parents, God, divine principle, or like our belief, or how much I value of this teaching. And then yeah, well, personally, I hesitate to bring up this conversation, but when I started communication with um, uh, Robert, who he's my spouse, I mentioned really in the beginning of matching process, kind of introducing myself and introducing like my story, how I am. Kind of I shared my vision, my goal, my future plan, also my belief, even like in the beginning. So I shared quite like everything, like even like during like 21 days, even this 21-day period in the beginning, I shared everything I have the kind of this topic. And also I like to hear his opinion too. And then if I really hesitate, I didn't want to talk so much, but it should have a very clear so that we have some common base, or we don't have a different point that we need to adjust. I really like to know in the beginning. So it really helps to move forward my matching process to decide whether I continue this matching process, even like I wanna receive risk with the person. Yeah.
Wow, that's such great wisdom. Like I think we say it sometimes, but I felt you really went into why it's so valuable to kind of just share from the beginning, the get-go, like this is me, this is what I think. But that also takes a lot of insight. Like you've worked on yourself, you're aware of like what are key values and important for you, and then it takes vulnerability to be able to share that way. Like I think it's one of those things that we recommend a lot, but it's easier said than done. It does take a level of self-awareness and maturity to bring that up and to ask that from the other person. But I can see really, like you said, the value, because it's all on the table, and then going from there. Thanks. You have something to add, Benjy?
Yeah, it sounds like we were doing a interview with Josh Fontaine and Rika Otsubo from Hawaii area. They live in Hawaii now. There was a podcast we did pretty recently. And something that I gleaned from that experience that they had is that because Rika was going through multiple matching processes, and her biggest kind of weight in the conversation was, I was previously blessed before, and she was kind of putting a lot of emotion and weight on that, right? For her, it was a big part of her identity, right, in her life experience. And then she had to go through a process of kind of maybe dispelling a lot of the shame associated with that, if you will, until the point where she talked with Josh. And then when they had the first conversation with her now husband, Josh, the first thing she said was, yeah, I was previously blessed. you know, like, what do you think? Like, without putting like all this like delaying in, like, I wonder what he's going to think, you know, if he's going to reject me. Like, she had to go through her own process of self growth and discovery to realize like she is who she is, and it's not a bad or good thing. It's just, that's her experience. And she kind of brought that out into her matching process with Josh and just said like, yeah, this is my experience. So I think for me, that's a really helpful tip, at least when you're talking about conversations that are uncomfortable in life in general, is not to put like too much weight and power and identity into it. You know, do you know what I'm saying? Like, have you ever talked with someone and they're like, they just like, some people are very much more like blunt about stuff, like in a kind of a productive way. And some people are like, I'm so sorry to say this. I don't know. I can't give an example, but like,
like what
sometimes
they say before it
yeah,
makes
like
you
some,
feel like,
yeah, like it's kind of like it's making an assumption about you as a person. Like, for example, sometimes people will like reach out to me on like Facebook or email and be like, hey, Benji, I know you're so busy, but and I'm so sorry to take up your time, but I have this little tiny question. If you could just, you know, it's like, just say it. And I get honestly frustrated because it's like, because there's a lot of like emotion and weight and assumption that's behind it that I'm not, like, I don't have the time of day to deal with people like you, and so that if you bring that weight into any conversation, it gives power to it, actually. Does that make sense? It's like, it gives power to it. It's like if you're driving on the road and you pass McDonald's, and every time you pass McDonald's, you go, don't go to McDonald's, don't go to McDonald's, don't go to McDonald's, don't go to McDonald's, and then you're probably going to go to McDonald's, right? Unless, as opposed to somebody who's just focused on driving and like getting to their destination, and they just ignore that part. It's just like something that exists, and it's not it like part of their mind frame. It's just there. So I'm not trying to belittle the experiences that people had, but in this example of Rika, it's like she had to go through this process of figuring out, like, what do I believe? What is my experience? Who am I? And how has this experience of being previously blessed before informed and changed who I am today? And what am I bringing into my matching process and blessing? And then from that, Josh was like, cool. Like, if you listen to their story, he was like, okay, like, so what? Like, you know, it wasn't a big deal for him, because I think it just wasn't part of like a weighted identity for Rika so much, you know, because she had to go through that. Yeah. Anyways, I just want to share that.
I mean, I think that's really key. You're hitting at the core kind of essence of how the way we share about ourselves. Like, it says a lot of like how we feel about it, right? And adds, or what we may assume others think about it. I do think when you were talking a bit, I was like, I do think there's a little cultural nuance here too, which is interesting when we talk about matching and blessing and international cross-cultural communication too. And I think, you know, like, I personally, my husband being Norwegian, and when we were communicating with each other, like, there's unnaturally allowing space for like misunderstandings to happen and not put too much weight on it. But I definitely did that. Like, there would be, I remember in the beginning, because we talked a lot online, which I realized was a little bit of a disadvantage because English is my first language. It's not for him. And he would take forever to respond. Like, I would ask a question that was like really important. I wanted to answer. And I'm like, why is he taking so long? Just like when you see someone like texting, and then you're like, what are they thinking? Like, but then I was like, wait a second. He's like, this is not his first language, right? And so I was, even in the other person's response or expectation, I was putting a lot on the weight of like what I expected the answer for the question. One of our big discussions was, when would he visit the US, right? And like, and I wanted him to prioritize it sooner, and he, you know, and it was really hard for me to voice that. That was a very difficult conversation. I actually went to an older couple that I looked up to, and blessed couple in the community, to ask them how they voiced, how they discussed this kind of situation of like visiting and prioritizing, and when you feel like you're not on the same page. And so that's one other tip too, is like, when you feel there's a lot on yourself getting there, and when you feel like you're recognizing yourself, maybe you are putting too much weight and you're not quite sure what to do, it's also seeking advice from others about how they approached it. Like, the advice I got was to write it out instead of trying to talk it out in our conversation or type it out. I wrote the whole thing, what I was feeling, in a letter. And sent it that way. So he could like, and give him some time to respond. Cause that was really important for us. Like we still do that for some things.
Mhm.
That's in Mars and Venus book, by the way, Men Are from Mars. Because like in some ways we immediately interrupt each other in communicating. If we're not excellent communicators or listening, right? Like you can jump in or make assumptions without getting the full picture of what the person's trying to say. So that was something that helped us personally. And I think, yeah, it might not be just because of language differences, but also communication styles in the family. Some families were much more open about things, and others it was like eggshells on certain topics, right?
Yeah.
But I feel like giving each other the space that it's okay, and these kind of things are going to come up. Just like you were saying, Benji, like not even to put too much weight on, okay, maybe you said this not the best way, or you felt hurt when they said that. Like I think the more you can be open about even how we're communicating, right? Or how could we communicate better or seek advice from others? That's it, right? Being honest about we need to grow in this area. I think all of us, I would say everybody, communication, listening skills, we're always learning, right?
Yeah, I will say I definitely suck at this. I still very much suck at this, and I have always sucked at it ever since the beginning of our blessing. Like quite frankly, because like you said, I'm the guy that will like. I grew up in an eggshell kind of family where we like don't talk about some things, and if someone says something offensive, it's like, how dare you? You must apologize. You know, it's like, at least that's how me and my brother were. It's like, you can't say that. You know, whereas my wife grew up in a family where it's just like, you just say what you think, and you're just blunt, and you get over it quickly, which quite frankly, I think is a very fun and healthy way to live life. And sometimes if you put two people who are from those different worlds, right? I'm sure a lot of people can relate in like our Italian and South American families, like they can relate generally speaking, about being just like blunt and just getting stuff out and having arguments and discussions. And that's a very, very healthy and productive way to be. But when you put two people together who are from those different worlds, I was like, I can't believe, like, why would you say that? How could you say that? Because I put so much meaning behind everything. You know what I'm saying? Like every little thing my wife would say, like, can you wash the dishes this way, honey? I'm like, you think I can't wash dishes? Like, how old do you think I am? Like, I get so offended. Like, I can wash dishes. Watch me wash this dish, you know? And she's like, I was just making a comment, you know? She like, literally, she's putting no emotion behind her comment. She's just saying like, this is probably a better way to wash dishes. And she's usually right, by the way. And it's so funny because I like so many times I like clog the dishwasher because I just like throw stuff in there without like rinsing it off, you know? And it just gets clogged because the food piles. And she's like, yeah. And I'm like, yeah, you're right. So I'm saying this because I've had to learn through a lot of painstaking conversations that it's much better long term to be okay with saying things that are uncomfortable without putting emotion behind it and not making it about me, because ultimately that's what it is. Right? If you think about it, it's like, I don't want to be honest. And I remember distinctly one time in my like career where I had to confront somebody in our team, not this team, by the way, confront something about the team because it was a really important discussion to have about the like overall, you know, team dynamic. And I remember my heart beating so fast. Like I was so scared to death to like confront this issue, right? Because it was a big issue. And I remember just like, I couldn't, like my heart was beating, I couldn't breathe. And so I told someone, I was like, I can't do this. Like, I'm so nervous to say this. And he was basically like, it's because you're making it about you, because you're afraid of how you're going to get hurt. You're not afraid of hurting them. You're afraid of you getting hurt. That's why you're nervous. And he was like, I was like, yeah, you're right. Then he gave me really good advice. You know, he said, just say it as if you're dancing. Just say it and like, just have like a dancing monkey in your brain, in your mind. Just say like, hey, you know, like just say it as a matter of fact. And honestly, I admire people like that so much. And I've practiced, I do actively practice that of just being able to say things. If it's productive, like if it'll actually help like the overall goals of the team or a team sports, for example, or whatever, then it's worth saying. And it doesn't have to be such a difficult thing. If it's not worth saying, then don't say it. But if it's actually worth saying and it's something that you think is important, then just say it. And I really admire people that could just do that and not be all weird about it. Like sometimes you'll play with sports with people And some people just be like, hey, like do this next time. And they just
Yeah.
like, you know what I'm saying? Like they'll just say like,
Mm.
give you advice.
Yeah.
But when I give people an advice, I'm like I don't want to, because like I don't want to offend them. I'm just like, hey, you know, maybe you could. So I just usually don't say anything. But some people are just like, hey, you know, why don't you do this with your hands or jump like this and it'll be better. I'm talking about volleyball here. And I think it's a really, really important thing to have in marriage, is just the ability to be honest without like making it weighted and about me. So that's something we don't usually talk about, but I think it's a really important point. If you think about like the most successful like business people, you know, for example, they are able to put their emotions aside to make long-term decisions and make decisions that are best for the overall. And this applies to every area of life. If you can put emotions beside your health, for example, and your fitness, then you probably will see more success, because you will stop being up and down with your emotions. Like, oh, I don't feel like exercising today. I don't feel like this. But you'll just be more consistent because you're not putting yourself in. Does that make sense? Like, I'm not saying emotions are bad, but if the emotion is getting in the way of where you want to go, then I think it's worth addressing and considering.
Yeah. I feel like it's taking control of your emotions in the sense of like, well, I think part of it is a huge self-awareness, like you talked about, and then practice. I think it was a great, like you emphasize that too, like it's something you're practicing, even being able to address that. Like I always say one of the big things about vulnerability is like, there's always this awkward moment. And if you can be the one to be the first one to be vulnerable, even silly, like the monkey dancing, or to say the silly question, it just gets over that awkwardness, but it makes it so much easier for the other person. And you know, going into this, like in the matching conversations too, like there's so many, I feel, things you have to navigate and pressures and big questions that you're going into thinking about and weighing. And I loved your example, Tomomi, of like just kind of being the first one to do that and put that on the table. And I feel like I could see how that came from maybe experiences in the past of what you learned, or you know, that you realize like, okay, it's really important to say this now or bring this up. I don't know if back to you, Tomomi, if there's anything from things you learned, or even things like Benjy was sharing great examples, things I wish I did better or I'm still working on. But yeah, especially in like matching conversation.
Yeah, I really do agree when you say just say just say without like afraid of conflict, or for me like rejection. Because like when we just started like process, I mean, those who start, two people don't know so much each other, but in just saying, like showing myself, introducing myself, and then the partner, if don't accept, probably it might be reject or finish end up conversation. But that's why I really hesitated to that. But I try to more focusing on like relationship, like honest or strong relationship between the partner. So if he doesn't accept or he didn't accept, then it's fine. Probably this process will not work out. That's fine. So just try to be honest, try to be vulnerable. That is really important. For me, some people say to me, "Oh, Tomomi, you are a little bit stubborn," because having your strong opinion, for example, your future plan, and also life of faith, and then because of that, my past matching process didn't work out, because I wanted to keep this my passion, my work, future plan, but he yeah, was struggle with that. And then it ended up my matching process. But yeah, it is good because it was good because I'm keeping my my opinion or like stay strong. Yeah, somehow future I found Robert who really understand my vision, my passion, or really accept who I am, and really strong relationship with him. So yeah, I'm grateful for having a strong opinion in the beginning. Yeah.
Wow.
Nice.
Thanks for sharing that. I think that takes a lot of courage, like to being true to who you believe or holding on to things, even if it meant, rejection or ending a process and having to start again. And that's not easy. That's what comes to my mind in a lot of this whole topic of like thinking of just, okay, you're starting this new process again with another person, and even letting go of concepts from the past one. Like Benji shared the example of Rika too, how she was working through what she was bringing into it. But I don't know. I just say I have so much respect for everybody because it's not easy. It's not easy. The navigating these kind of conversations. But I think also like the weight we put on it, or having to see, I do think talking earlier about things just keeps it easier and lighter than, avoiding things for a long time and dragging isn't a great word, but, continuing a conversation, but avoiding some of these key topics because it doesn't make it any easier, but it takes a lot of courage. So I want to.
Can I share a conversation I had just yesterday, actually, with a guy who is, this is very relevant, right? Figures. Yeah. So my experience personally, I shared before, like of learning how to have uncomfortable conversations with my wife, but also I've had a lot of conversations with matching candidates who are going through difficult conversations. I would say maybe like 90% of the time people reach out to me to talk about matching. It's because,
Wow.
it's because they're going through a difficult conversation right now and they don't know what to do about it. Right. And most of the time it's to do with, differences, fundamental differences in beliefs, or difficult mistakes or habits or ongoing habits, especially regarding sexual integrity, porn addiction, and they don't know how to talk about it. Right. So in this instance yesterday, they're going through the 41 questions, which is a list of questions that we recommend people ask each other during the matching process. And they were going through it and they were about to go into a question about addiction. Right. And so we were talking and he basically was like, I really want to talk about my porn habit. Right. And so for him, it's like, anyways, it's an ongoing issue. Right. But I really don't feel comfortable right now talking about, like, I really want to, and I understand it's important and I'm definitely going to, but right now it's just, we just started talking and I don't feel like a foundation or comfortable talking about it, which is I think a very common situation. So I was like, so this was my advice. I was like, okay, you can, and you can, if you want right now, or you can wait a little bit. It's up to you. Like, I'm not going to tell you which one you should do, but you absolutely need to tell them before you make a commitment. Like that's absolute, because trust is the only thing that keeps a marriage together. If you think about that, like trust is the only thing that keeps people together. That's True Father's word. It's the most important thing. Read it. In the autobiography, he said, trust is the most important thing in marriage. So I said, so I actually disagree personally when people say, like, you should bring up stuff like this immediately in a relationship. I think that if you do that, it actually masks a more deep rooted issue that should be addressed first. And if you address it like that, then it's a more natural conversation to have, right? So I was talking with him. I was like, okay, so why do you have this porn habit? And he was like, I don't know. I was like, okay, well, let's talk about it. When you decide to do destructive things to yourself, not just porn, like, whatever it is, social media, goofing around online, watching TV shows when you should be working, going to social media when you should be working or whatever. Why do you do that? And he's like, well, because I'm really bored. That's what he said, right? He's really bored, or he's feeling really anxious about something. I was like, okay, interesting. So do you feel comfortable talking to your match about your boredom and your anxiety? He's like, yeah. I was like, well, guess what? That is actually a deep-rooted issue that you have that don't you think she would want to know about? That you have so much anxiety in your life and stress that you've never learned how to deal with it to the point that you've developed a porn habit. Now that's a natural conversation, right?
Yeah,
because
totally.
if you're having a good conversation with someone, you say, hey, I feel a lot of anxiety nowadays because of work and because of school, because of stress and relationships with my family. If it's a good conversation, she'll go, okay, why is that? I'll say, well, because, when I was a child, I experienced this or this happened and this happened, and you kind of peel it back. And then the conversation continues and she goes, okay, well, how does that come up in your life nowadays? Like, how does it affect you now? I was like, well, I have this ongoing addiction to porn. And it's like, you see I'm going, it's like, it's not a weighted thing. It's like, this is a conversation that needs to happen. And it's not reasonable for her to say, how dare you have a porn habit? It's like, no, you're having a conversation. You know what I'm saying? You're not married. You're not blessed.
Yeah.
You're not even matched. She has no reason to be upset at you. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
You're in a conversation about, do we want to continue with this matching process or not? So why is it reasonable for her to be upset? No one's going to be upset at you. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And I promise you, if you approach it like that, it doesn't mask the actual issue, because then she can start to understand why you have it. Because that's what people wonder. People that don't have addictions, guys, wonder, why do people do that? You know what I'm saying? Like people that don't play video games, they go, why do people play? I don't get it. People that don't smoke, they don't walk around going, man, I really want to smoke today. No, they just like, it's disgusting. Like, why do people smoke? I don't get it, right? It's because they haven't developed the desensitization and the dependency that people have the habit with or do. So if you approach it from, I have this deep-seated issue that I never learned how to figure out, then it's like, oh, okay, I kind of understand. Like, I have a little empathy because you're trying to escape something, right? So all of this is to say that I think the best way to approach difficult topics is to actually get to the root issue first.
Yeah.
And not to mask it with, oh, I went, this person said this and that person said that. And it's like people say like, oh, I don't like I actually had someone say this to me before in our community. It's like, I don't go to church because I don't like the smell of it. I'm like, are you like literally? He's like, yeah, the paint smells. I was like, because we just painted it. And he's like, yeah. I was like, so you did like, okay, like that's fine. You don't have to go to church. But I'm saying that's a silly reason to decide that church is not for you because you didn't like the smell of it. There's obviously something else going on. And this is a silly example, I know, but this is a bigger issue than we think. Because we mask that real issue, which is a deep-seated thing. And we think, and when we blame the system, we blame something bigger when it's actually just a more deeper thing than that. So I recommend that you start broad and you go inward.
Yeah.
You ask bigger questions. And this is what my wife and I do all the time. For example, I get upset. I used to get upset when my wife would tell me to wash the dishes a certain way. Like I remember like getting like, I know how to wash dishes. Right? Of course, it's nothing to do with dishes, right? And I know that because I'm smart enough and I'm self-aware enough to know that. So I was like, okay, why am I so stressed about this issue thing, right? And if I really peel back, it's like, well, without getting too deep into it now, it's like, I mean, it's a lot to do with my environment and how I perceived myself as a child in my upbringing, right? Nothing to do with my parents. It's really like how I perceived things, how I experienced things, and it informed. Yeah. And I created this kind of a like defense mechanism, a survival mechanism to always do the right thing and do things right. And when I'm not doing something right, I feel like I'm failing as a man. And when someone says that I didn't pass the ball right in volleyball, or I didn't wash the dishes correctly, or I'm doing something wrong, I feel like I'm failing as a man, and I make it personal. That's why I do that. And that's understanding. You don't have to fix it. And that's the other point I want to make here is it's unreasonable to expect you'll be good at this crap from the beginning, talking about difficult stuff.
Yeah.
Sorry for being strong with you guys. This is why I asked Yana to lead this. I asked Yana to host this because I'm feeling edgy about this. All right.
Create the atmosphere around difficult conversation. Yeah.
Okay. Because it's unreasonable to think you'll be good at this from the beginning. And people beat themselves up and they say, oh, like, we're having this difficult conversation. It's like, how many conversations have you had in your life? Like, how many times have you practiced this? Once? 10 times, it takes hundreds and thousands of conversations about difficult conversations to get good at it.
Yeah.
Thousands. Okay. Trust us, Yana and I, and Tomomi. Tomomi had to go through her own process of figuring out how to have these conversations, right? 31 years old. It takes a long time. Don't think you'll be good at it. And it's unreasonable to think that because I'm not good at this, it's somehow an issue. Sure, it's something that needs to be managed and developed and grown, but it's not something that can be fixed. Does that make sense? And that's a very liberating mindset to have personally, is if I have an issue in my life, I don't think, oh, this is an issue, I need to fix it immediately.
Yeah.
But rather, it's something that needs to be managed and something that needs to be developed. And that takes time, and that's okay. But yeah, you're going to suck at having difficult conversations with your parents about the matching. You're going to suck at it. You're going to suck at having difficult conversations about your matching partner. And that's okay. And just let that be okay. And that's liberating.
Yeah.
Because then you don't have to fix it. Okay. I'm done talking about that. So just saying, like, long-term perspective, guys. Okay. Long-term.
Yeah.
It's a growth process. It's a long-term perspective. And I promise you, if you keep doing it and doing the reps of having conversations, you will get good at it, and you will get better and better. And trust me, I still suck at this, but I'm getting better. And I'm actively trying to always get better at having conversations and not even labeling them as difficult. It's just like, it's just a fact. It's just a fact. You know what I'm saying? Rika was like, it's just a fact that I was blessed before. Josh, like, what do you think? What do you want to do about it? And then the universe, that Josh was like open-minded enough to not let, she needs to be a first-time like blessing. She can't be previous blessed. And he didn't let that bog him down. And he just was like, okay, I'm open to this. And guess what? They're happy.
Blessed.
They're blessed.
Yeah.
And they're going to have a great family and relationship because they're both committed to growing and doing all the stuff we talk about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think it's also like the interesting thing about practicing this and it, working on ourselves. It is really a healing of yourself, not like fix, like you said, Benjy. I think you described it well, but it becomes part of easier to do with practice, but also just I think one of the biggest things, and I think I've shared this like on the podcast several times, but that clarity comes from engagement and not thought, and like sitting in our heads, and especially the things that we feel a lot of weight on, these root issues, because they're stories we've told ourselves and internalized. And that's what we're bringing into whatever, are the habits that we have around that issue. But the more and more that you talk about, this is who I am, or even, and also let people surprise you. Because that's, I think the biggest thing for me is like, I was so closed for a lot of my life being able to talk about things because of a fear of judgment or rejection or those, but also, we're not very generous sometimes in the way that we think of other people. And you mentioned that too, like we kind of assume things or assume that they'll see me this way. And that's all kind of because of being too much in your head too long. So it's like, there's a reason we have each other and we need each other to talk about these things, and not just, it's making me think about the blessing interview too, the value of the blessing interview, and why, confession and talking to a person who represents God, and you can receive God's love, because we get too much in our head a lot of times, especially the way we see each other and carry on that weight. Even the way that we know that we need to grow, right? Like if you acknowledge that conversation really didn't go well, but okay, it was a learning experience. But sometimes we really beat ourselves up over things. And even just being aware of that is so, be that kind of loving toward yourself, the way that you would be toward a friend. Like, oh, it's okay, just try again or talk about it. But like towards ourselves, so many times we can be much more harsh, right? But I think what you said about root issue, nail on the head. Like that's really what a lot of difficult conversations, but I think it takes time and wisdom to sort of recognize that too. And that's why we have this podcast, to share these tips and help the conversation. Yeah. Well, thank you. Thanks for today. I feel like there's so much more here, but I feel we'll,
can I give one more point that might be before
wrap up, and Tomomi too, if she wants to.
Yeah, please. Like, I think all of our perspectives are different, which is good to have different people. Something that helped my wife and I go through some difficult things is that we did a condition we've done several conditions of like Honuke and prayer about a specific point. You know what I'm saying?
Nice.
Like
Yeah.
not just like general spiritual growth, like a specific thing. For us, the recent one was like, when are we going to have our next child, right? So we were having like debates about that, you know, between us. And so it kind of took a while. And then we're like, okay, let's just pray about this and do a condition. And then we did it. And then we like just searched for passages and words about, you know, the world and children and spirit world, that kind of stuff. And it just gave us perspective. And then we're like, you know what? Let's have a baby. So here we are. My wife is 8 months pregnant.
Yay.
And it worked. Like it worked. Because I was the one that was like, I want to have more kids. And she was like, yeah, she was like, good luck, you know.
It is a lot.
She was like, go for it, you know. Which I understand, right? So that's the thing, is like we both disagree, but it wasn't like, I hate you, like I can't believe, you know. It's like, okay, well, let's take time, let's grow through this, and not think is like this is a problem that needs fixing. It's like, we'll manage this. And we did condition, and that really helped. So maybe that's something you could try.
Yeah. Any last thoughts, Tomomi?
Yeah, well, yeah, one thing I really try to develop my nature for matching process is I was, I think, a judgmental person. So when I try to do matching process, I was easy to see people's or mistake or different mindset, different character. So it was not easy to forgive people's mistake, but through knowing my lacking point or like my weakness, I came to realize, I think I was really judgmental to me.
Yeah.
So I really practiced myself, forgiving myself first, before really, starting process with anyone. Next for the matching process, and then I have my lacking point, or like, you know, my fallen nature, or like, I couldn't forgive myself some points. I tried to understand. I try to deal with how I can overcome my difficulties. And then after that, once I started, I feel I don't have any judgment or viewpoint to a person. And even like, oh, maybe, even it is probably difficult to understand. I try to accept, or I try to embrace person's mistake or person's nature that I didn't accept before.
Wow.
So I think it helps.
Yeah. I think that's, again, like the core of, you know, being able to be or navigate uncomfortable situations and conversations, is looking at yourself first. And I like you said that, forgiving yourself, and even the judgment you feel, right, is more coming from there to yourself.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of great wisdom.
If I forgive everything myself, I think I can forgive or understand people, the person or your spouse, everything. Yeah.
I just, again, wrapping it up, or last thought, I always feel like kind of, you know, what's the point of it all, or like to motivate someone, because it isn't easy, these difficult conversations, but we're always growing to kind of love the way that God loves. Like, I feel like that sort of depth, and, you know, to be loving and accepting and non-judgmental. And I can say that, especially as a parent, like, you want to be like that as a parent with your children, but it doesn't come, like Benjy emphasized, it doesn't come like that. Like it's through so much of these situations where we have to practice things, and the matching conversations, it's confronting, and it brings up a lot of these things that are actually very healthy, you know, in long-term perspective of life, that are useful skills to learn. I guess I want to say that, especially to those who feel they've been through many matching process or conversations and navigating it, but just see how you're strengthening this awareness of yourself. Like, there's so many things you're growing and benefiting from this, even if you don't always recognize it in yourself. I hope that's something you can get from this overall talk. It's been really great. Thank you, Tomomi. Thank you, Benjy, for this conversation. Thank you,
Thanks,
everyone listening to the
Thank you.
podcast.
Go to matchnet.us if you want to join our program, and also follow the podcast, etc.
And share. If you think this is valuable for someone you know, just send them this.
Mhm.
All right. Bye.